The Israel-Palestine conflict is a complex and enduring struggle with roots stretching back over a century. At its core lies a dispute over land and resources intertwined with competing national and religious claims. For Palestinians, the conflict represents a struggle for self-determination and an end to decades of displacement and occupation. For Israelis, it is a fight for security and recognition within a historically hostile region. The conflict's origins can be traced back to the early 20th century with the rise of both Zionism, a movement advocating for a Jewish state in Palestine, and Palestinian nationalism. The 1948 Arab-Israeli War resulted in the creation of the State of Israel and the displacement of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians, an event known as the Nakba, or catastrophe. Subsequent wars in 1967 and 1973 further entrenched Israel's control over the West Bank, Gaza Strip, and East Jerusalem, territories claimed by Palestinians for a future state. The Oslo Accords of the 1990s offered a glimmer of hope for a negotiated two-state solution, but the process ultimately stalled, leaving the Palestinians living under Israeli occupation. Decades of failed peace initiatives, coupled with ongoing violence and settlement expansion, have fueled a deep sense of grievance and mistrust on both sides. The conflict has claimed the lives of countless Israelis and Palestinians, leaving generations scarred by loss and trauma. The international community has long recognized the need for a just and lasting resolution to the conflict based on a two-state solution. However, achieving this goal has proven elusive, with the situation on the ground becoming increasingly volatile in recent years. The recent escalation of violence, coupled with the dire humanitarian crisis unfolding in Gaza, underscores the urgent need for a renewed international effort to break the cycle of violence and address the root causes of the conflict. The Israel-Palestine conflict entered a new and devastating chapter on October 7, 2023, when Hamas, the militant group controlling the Gaza Strip, launched a surprise attack on southern Israel. The assault, which involved a coordinated incursion by land, sea, and air, marked the deadliest day in Israel's history, claiming the lives of over 1,100 Israelis. Hamas's attack came as a shock to many, shattering a period of relative calm and igniting a fierce Israeli military response. While the group framed its actions as retaliation for years of Israeli occupation and blockade, the attack was widely condemned by the international community as a terrorist act. The Israeli government, led by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, vowed swift and decisive retribution, launching a massive aerial bombardment of the Gaza Strip. Within hours, the densely populated enclave was transformed into a war zone, with explosions illuminating the night sky and the deafening roar of fighter jets becoming an omnipresent soundtrack to life. The October 7th attack sent shockwaves far beyond the borders of Israel and Palestine, prompting international condemnation and fears of a wider regional conflict. The attack also had profound implications for the already fragile peace process, further dimming hopes for a negotiated two-state solution. The Gaza Strip, a narrow coastal enclave home to over 2 million Palestinians, has been under Israeli blockade since 2007. The blockade, imposed after Hamas's takeover of the territory, has severely restricted the movement of people and goods, crippling the Gazan economy and plunging its residents into a protracted humanitarian crisis. The October 7th attack and the ensuing Israeli military offensive have exacerbated the already dire humanitarian situation in Gaza. The relentless bombardment has reduced entire neighborhoods to rubble, leaving behind a landscape of devastation and despair. Hospitals, schools, and vital infrastructure have been targeted, further crippling the enclave's ability to cope with the mounting needs of its besieged population. With limited access to clean water, electricity, and essential medical supplies, the people of Gaza are facing a humanitarian catastrophe of unprecedented proportions. The International Committee of the Red Cross has described the situation as catastrophic, warning of a total collapse of basic services. The United Nations has estimated that over 90% of Gaza's population has been displaced by the fighting, seeking refuge in overcrowded UN shelters, schools and mosques. These makeshift shelters, often lacking basic sanitation and hygiene facilities, are struggling to cope with the influx of displaced families, raising concerns about the potential spread of disease. Behind the statistics and headlines lie countless individual stories of loss, displacement, and resilience. The Israel-Palestine conflict is not an abstract geopolitical dispute. It is a human tragedy that has profoundly impacted the lives of millions of ordinary people. Eman Shagnoubi, a mother of 4 living in Gaza City, lost her home and her livelihood in the recent bombardment. "We are living a nightmare," she shared with Al Jazeera, her voice trembling with emotion. "My children are terrified, and we have nowhere to go. We have lost everything." Shireen Abu Nida, a doctor at a hospital in Gaza City, described the harrowing conditions she and her colleagues face on a daily basis. "Our hospital is overwhelmed with casualties, and we are running out of essential medical supplies. We are forced to make impossible choices every day, deciding who lives and who dies." Musa Ali Muhammad al-Maghribi, a farmer in southern Gaza, lost his entire olive grove, his family's sole source of income in the recent fighting. "This land has been in my family for generations," he lamented. "Now it is gone, and I have no way to provide for my family." These personal accounts offer a glimpse into the human cost of the Israel-Palestine conflict, a conflict that has exacted a heavy toll on both Palestinians and Israelis. The stories of these individuals, and countless others like them, serve as a powerful reminder of the urgent need for a just and peaceful resolution to this enduring conflict. Section 5. Beyond Gaza, the West Bank and the shadow of occupation. While the Gaza Strip has borne the brunt of the recent violence, the West Bank, another Palestinian territory occupied by Israel since 1967, has also witnessed a surge in tensions and violence. The West Bank, home to over 3 million Palestinians, exists under a complex system of Israeli military control and fragmented Palestinian self-rule. The expansion of Israeli settlements in the West Bank, considered illegal under international law, has been a major point of contention in the conflict, fueling Palestinian resentment and undermining the viability of a future Palestinian state. The presence of these settlements, coupled with the Israeli military's control over movement and resources, has created a system of segregation and inequality that Palestinians liken to apartheid. The recent escalation in violence has seen an increase in clashes between Palestinian protesters and Israeli security forces in the West Bank, resulting in Palestinian casualties and further fueling tensions. The situation in the West Bank remains highly volatile, with the potential for further escalation and bloodshed. The international community has repeatedly called for an end to Israeli settlement expansion and a return to meaningful negotiations aimed at achieving a two-state solution. However, progress towards this goal remains elusive, with the situation on the ground continuing to deteriorate. Section 6. Accusations of genocide, a contentious debate. The escalating violence in Gaza and the mounting civilian casualties have led to accusations of genocide against Israel from some quarters. Amnesty International, in a December 2024 report, concluded that Israel's actions in Gaza amount to genocide, citing the systematic destruction of civilian infrastructure, the intent to destroy the Palestinian people, and statements by Israeli officials. The UN and various other human rights groups have also raised concerns about the possibility of genocide being committed in Gaza, pointing to the disproportionate use of force against civilians, the targeting of vital infrastructure, and the denial of humanitarian access. These accusations have sparked a heated debate within the international community, with some countries condemning Israel's actions while others defend them as legitimate self-defense. Israel vehemently rejects the accusations of genocide, arguing that its military operations are directed solely at Hamas and other militant groups operating in Gaza. The Israeli government maintains that it takes all necessary precautions to minimize civilian casualties and blames Hamas for using civilians as human shields. The accusations of genocide are extremely serious and require thorough investigation by independent international bodies. Regardless of whether these accusations are ultimately proven, the sheer scale of the humanitarian crisis in Gaza and the mounting civilian casualties demand urgent international action to protect civilians and hold those responsible for violations of international law accountable. Section 7. The international community, a chorus of condemnation and inaction. The international community has responded to the escalating violence in Israel and Palestine with a mixture of condemnation and calls for restraint, yet concrete action to address the root causes of the conflict and alleviate the humanitarian crisis has been lacking. The United Nations Security Council, often paralyzed by vetoes from permanent members, has struggled to reach a consensus on a resolution to the conflict. The United States, a staunch ally of Israel, has repeatedly blocked UN resolutions condemning Israeli actions, arguing that they are counterproductive and undermine efforts to achieve a negotiated settlement. While the UN General Assembly has adopted resolutions calling for a ceasefire and condemning Israeli actions, these resolutions are non-binding and have had little impact on the ground. The International Criminal Court, ICC, has opened an investigation into alleged war crimes committed by both Israeli forces and Palestinian militant groups, but the investigation has been met with resistance and non-cooperation from Israel. The international community's failure to hold Israel accountable for its actions and its continued support for the Israeli occupation have been widely criticized, with some arguing that it emboldens Israel's actions and perpetuates the cycle of violence. Section 8. The role of humanitarian aid, a lifeline in a sea of suffering. Amidst the devastation and despair, humanitarian organizations are working tirelessly to provide life-saving assistance to those affected by the conflict. The International Committee of the Red Cross, ICRC, the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees in the Near East, UNRWA, and other NGOs are providing essential medical care, food, water and shelter to those in need. However, humanitarian access to Gaza remains severely restricted, with Israel controlling all entry and exit points. The Israeli government has been accused of deliberately obstructing aid deliveries and of targeting humanitarian workers, further hindering efforts to alleviate the suffering of the civilian population. The international community must exert pressure on Israel to ensure unimpeded humanitarian access to Gaza and to provide the necessary funding to support the ongoing humanitarian response. The humanitarian crisis in Gaza is a man-made disaster, and it requires a concerted international effort to address both the immediate needs of the population and the underlying political causes of the conflict. Section 9. The path forward towards a just and lasting peace. The ongoing violence in Israel and Palestine underscores the urgent need for a just and lasting peace based on a two-state solution with an independent Palestinian state alongside Israel. Achieving this goal will require a fundamental shift in the political dynamics of the conflict, with both sides demonstrating a genuine commitment to peace and a willingness to make difficult compromises. The international community has a crucial role to play in facilitating meaningful negotiations between Israelis and Palestinians, providing the necessary security guarantees to both sides and holding both sides accountable for violations of international law. A renewed international effort to resolve the Israel-Palestine conflict is long overdue, and it is time for the international community to live up to its responsibility to promote peace and justice in this troubled region. The path to peace will be long and arduous, but the alternative, continued violence, suffering and instability, is simply unacceptable. The time for action is now before another generation is lost to this seemingly intractable conflict.